And joining us now to talk more about that is Kentucky Congressman Andy Barr, who serves on the House Financial Services Committee. Congressman, it's good to see you. Thanks very much.
Good to see you, Maria.
Was this the right move?
We're going to be reviewing whether it was the right move. Our subcommittee has jurisdiction over the CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. And in fact, our committee, the Financial Services Committee, is evaluating legislation to modernize the CFIUS process. Clearly, China and other countries are making moves to acquire critical technologies in the United States that could indeed compromise American national security. But we should always start with the basic proposition that foreign direct investment is good for America. It's good for American competitiveness. It's responsible for 6.8 million American jobs, and these are higher paying jobs than typical American jobs. And it's responsible for about $900 billion in GDP output every year. So we should always start with the presumption that foreign investment is benign. Yeah. And so to the extent that CFIUS is exercising its authorities to block deals, we need to scrutinize that.
So is this more about China? I made the point earlier that China is participating in up to 10% of venture deals in the U.S. for that reason, to get technology and, intelligence.
Right. And dual-use technologies, technologies that could be used for artificial intelligence and other issues, semiconductors, but dual use in the fact that some of these technologies could be used for military applications. So we do need to look at these. We do need to probably expand the CFIUS jurisdiction to joint ventures and to other non-controlling investments. However, again, we have to make sure that this is not used for economic protectionism, the CFIUS process, and focus exclusively on national security issues.
So, Congressman, I want to drill down on that a little bit philosophically. So you're a Republican. Republicans have traditionally stood for free and unfettered markets, free movement of capital and goods across borders. We now have a Republican in the White House who's put in tariffs on steel and aluminum in the last week. And now this deal in which the government is intervening with two private companies doing a transaction. How do you digest this philosophically? Does it fit into your philosophical mindset of free and unfettered markets?
Well, it's that balance that we need to strike between national security and free and unfettered markets, as you say. The Broadcom deal is an interesting one because it's a Singapore-based company. It's not a Chinese company.
It was going to move its headquarters here, though.
It was. And so the issue really that we need to look at as we exercise oversight over the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States is do we give that committee the ability, and do we give the president the ability to block deals where an adversary is not the acquiring entity, but the acquisition itself would perhaps compromise American competitiveness relative to an adversary like China?
Yeah. But you reviewing this CFIUS ruling, you going in and trying to change, it was the Exxon Florio Amendment, I think in '88, that gave the president the authority to veto a deal based on national security concerns. Even if you tweak that, that doesn't necessarily revive the Broadcom-Qualcomm deal, does it?
No, in fact, the legislation before the Congress right now would actually expand the jurisdiction of CFIUS. It wouldn't remove it. It wouldn't limit it. It would expand it to joint ventures and non-controlling investments. So I think we do need to have a balanced approach here, but we also do need to recognize that China and other entities are engaged in efforts to circumvent the existing jurisdiction.
That's the issue here. And that's the issue around tariffs, too.
To your point, 20% of the deals reviewed by CFIUS between 2013 and 2015, that's the last information available, by the way. There's no transparency with CFIUS. 20% of those deals involve Chinese investors.
Yes.
Incredible number.
Yeah, it's an incredible number.
Congressman Barr, I'm curious. I mean, the statement the White House put out here was that the effect of downsizing Qualcomm's research budget was the security threat. So what would you guys have done if it was a U.S. private equity firm buying Qualcomm with the same threat?
Well, I think in that case, CFIUS would not have jurisdiction, and certainly the president would not have jurisdiction to block that deal. Again, we don't want to prevent economizing transactions. And we also don't want to have a bias against foreign direct investment, which, as I said before, can be very productive and growth-oriented. And my district is a perfect example of that, with a lot of foreign direct investment that has created a lot of good, high-paying jobs. So,
but I guess, do you think the White House would have blocked the deal if another U.S. private equity firm posed the same existential threat to Qualcomm falling behind the tech race?
No, unless there's a beneficial ownership interest that can be traced back to an adversary like China. So that's what you're seeing right now is China circumventing CFIUS by controlling, say, a German company or an Irish company and circumventing
in this case,
CFIUS.
they're not controlling Broadcom. Broadcom is a Singaporean company.
Very good point, and that's why we need to ask tough questions to CFIUS in the upcoming hearings about whether or not a non-Chinese company, like a Singapore-based company, whether that acquisition and even a move to the United States would compromise American competitiveness.
CFIUS is a pretty, I'm sorry,
go ahead.
It's a pretty obscure Washington institution. I doubt many people have heard of it a year ago. Are you going to get the transparency you need to do a kind of review like this from CFIUS, and who is going to be representing it to you?
Well, so the administration is presenting its views, and the administration does support reform and modernization of CFIUS. The legislation is the Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act. It's a piece of legislation sponsored by Senator Cornyn and my colleague Robert Pittenger. I applaud their leadership on addressing this real national security issue with Chinese investment and other investment that could compromise our competitive edge in critical technologies and national security sensitive technologies. But the key is it has to be essential to national security. If it's not essential to national security, we need to allow benign foreign direct investment to continue in the United States, because that actually enhances American competitiveness.
Congressman, before you go, we got to turn to taxes. Are you going to do phase 2 of the tax plan? Are you going to do another tax cut?
I hope so. I think we need to do a technical corrections bill. I think we should expand on the progress that we made. You've seen the jobs report from last week, 313,000 jobs created in February. You see business optimism at the highest level in history, consumer confidence.
Where would the tax cut be?
Well, I think we need to expand on the Main Street small business pass-through deduction. I think we need to expand it to more professional services companies and increase those thresholds. I think that would be a simplification of that provision as well.
So you're moving toward that then?
Well, I certainly hope so. I'm pushing for that. And I'd also like to hold the Democrats accountable when they say that they criticize the tax plan because the individual and small business tax cuts aren't permanent. Let's put them to the test. Let's vote to make those tax cuts permanent.
And real quick on the tariffs, Europeans are coming right at you in Kentucky.
Oh, they sure are.
Is that a fact that the Europeans are going to try to institute a 25% tariff?
Yes, and I signed a letter to the president, expressing our concern about the potential retaliation against Kentucky bourbon and Harley-Davidson and other sensitive American products. Again, free trade should be our default in every instance, and we don't want retaliation from the European Union or anyone else.
Are you going to come up with new legislation to block the president's tariffs?
Well, we are encouraged that the president has said that he will tailor it so that we are not discriminating against our allies. That's a good first step.